Hello and welcome to World Youth Day Central. I'm Pedro Guevara Mann.
And I'm Father Chris Valca. It's day 3 of World Youth Day Madrid, and the Pope has arrived.
The Pope has arrived. It was about 6 hours ago now that he arrived, and in about 15 minutes he will be at the papal welcome ceremony.
That's right.
This is one of the...
not quite there yet, though. We've got 15 minutes, and we've got a lot coming to you in that time.
Absolutely, we're going to go to that. But before that, we're going to do a quick recap of yesterday.
Right. We're also going to learn about one of the parts of World Youth Day that we haven't spoken a whole lot about yet, and it's always an underlying theme of World Youth Day.
Yes, and do you know who was the first saint of the Americas to be canonized? All of that and more is coming right up, so don't go anywhere.
Her feast day is celebrated on August the 23rd. Saint Rose of Lima is known for her love of the Eucharist and prayer. Born 1586, Lima, Peru. Saint Rose of Lima, pray for us.
For World Youth Day pilgrims in Madrid, there was one place to be on Wednesday, August 17th, and it was the Love and Life Center. The program began in the morning with an inspirational catechetical session led by Cardinal George Pell of Australia.
So I ask you to promise that you will do your best, that the flame of faith is not extinguished in your watch.
Following a presentation by Curtis Martin, founder of the Fellowship of Catholic University Students, the youth listened to a panel discussion on religious freedom and the media, which featured Archbishop Chaput, Father Thomas Rosica, Helen Alvarez, and Supreme Knight Carl Anderson.
Religious liberty goes to the center of what it means to be a person. It is foundational. It is at the very heart of the human person because it involves the human conscience. And therefore, it is the first right.
You will find me by your side.
The day culminated with Marianfest, a celebration of Mary through song, prayer, and reflection.
Juan Diego one day saw Our Lady of Guadalupe. And the message of Our Lady of Guadalupe, she said, I want a holy house. Yo quiero una casita sagrada. I want a holy house in order to give my son, my love, Jesus Christ. I want a holy house.
Mary was the first one to welcome Jesus. The first one to welcome Jesus into her home because she carried Christ in her womb. Blessed Pope John Paul II even referred to Mary as the first tabernacle in history.
Musical performances by Latin Grammy winner Alexander Acha and the world-renowned Irish singer Dana brought to a close another exciting day at the Love and Life Center.
Sing it out to the whole world. We are one Lord. On the rock of Peter, see my church I build. And we do not stand alone. Come receive my spirit with my gifts be filled. We are one body. You are my body, you're my hands and feet.
We'd like to thank David for and the Knights of Columbus for sharing that clip with us. One of the things that we've talked a lot about are all the pilgrims that are here, but one of the other stories is the gathering of religious and all of the priests that come here. We are joined this evening with one such religious. So,
yes.
Sister Angela Gutsema, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us here this evening. And you're with the Apostles of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Very good. And this is your first World Youth Day, as we understand.
Yes, it is.
What's been your impression so far?
It's awesome. I keep saying this is the best World Youth Day ever, but it's only my first one.
Yes.
Everybody is so excited, and there's pilgrims everywhere you look. Everybody's singing, chanting. It's just awesome. Everything has been great.
Sorry, I was gonna. But as a woman religious, do you? My experience in seeing so many clerical collars and so many habits is probably not the same as yours. But how do you feel about seeing so many other religious communities gathered together, so many priests, so many bishops?
I think it's great. I think it's also great for us to see each other, like from other countries.
Yeah.
We've met a lot of different religious from other countries. And then even we came together with a group from the United States, the CMSWR community.
Our viewers probably don't know what the CMSWR is, so you probably need to explain that.
Sorry. It's a group of religious communities that we just come together. It's a way of supporting one another.
So it's a community, like a conference of religious communities?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, your community is based in the United States.
Our mother house is in Rome, and then we're also based in the United States in Hamden, Connecticut.
And that's where you are.
And tell us about your community. Yeah, what is your community like? I mean, you're in Bridgeport. So
I'm in
what
Bridgeport.
do you do there? What is the work of your community? Give it. Here's your little plug. Here's your chance.
All right, here we go.
Vocations.
Okay, we're called the Apostles of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and apostle is somebody who's sent. So every year we're sent on mission wherever the church needs us to go, wherever our superiors need us to serve. And then we're apostles of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. So we want to spread Sacred Heart devotion. So this World Youth Day is really meaningful to us because everybody's being consecrated to the Sacred Heart.
Right.
So it's really exciting.
So would that be your charism? If
that would be our charism.
So how do you do that? How do
you do that in the way you live your life? I mean, it depends what your ministry also is. So if I'm a teacher, I want to bring the Sacred Heart to the children that I teach.
I see.
And that's what you do, correct?
You're
a teacher for...
I'm a teacher.
Third grade?
Third grade.
Third grade, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Now, sorry, one of the components of at least for the last couple World Youth Days, I believe since Toronto, is this idea of vocations and promoting vocations fairs. And this World Youth Day is no different. Well, it's a little different in that there isn't just one big vocations pavilion, but there are several vocation fairs, the largest one at Retiro Park. And Sheridan Echlar had a chance to visit one of these vocation fairs yesterday, and this is what she found.
I'm here at St. Francis Borgia Church in downtown Madrid, and it's the first ever vocations fair being held by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. The fair, which was very well received, included keynote speaker Father Robert Barron, testimonials, ongoing Eucharistic adoration, and plenty of opportunities to mingle with the bishops. The evening ended with benediction and prayer.
Most of us bishops can testify to the number of vocations that we've seen through young men and also young women to the religious life, young men to the priesthood, after having attended World Youth Day. I think it gets them really discerning. First of all, it draws them closer to Christ and to prayer, and that's fundamental. And World Youth Day, having that experience of learning that maybe God might be calling me. They see a lot of priests, they see a lot of sisters, they see a lot of seminarians, and we try to plant that seed because many young people perhaps never really thought about whether God might be calling them. So I think World Youth Day does that.
The church in general, we need holy vocations, whether it be religious or priest. We certainly need holy marriages, holy families, and I think they all come together and make up the fullness of the church, you know, having our natural parents, you know, as well as our spiritual mothers and fathers. And it's so important to have them all come together and really, you know, guide all the faithful into living the faith to the full and really entering into that relationship with the Lord.
When friends ask how I'm doing, I say I am having the time of my life and that I wouldn't exchange it for anything else. And as I get closer and closer to the priesthood, I realize a sense of unworthiness, you know, and you start to realize that the priesthood is a pure and undeserved gift that God generously gives to those who are called to participate in his priesthood. So that's been one of the biggest challenges, but the more I realize on how unworthy I am, the more I realize how much of a gift the priesthood is to serving God's people, no matter their age, no matter their situation in life. One adult who I grew up with, who's now in his 80s, he said, you know, one day I'll call you Father. And you realize that the priesthood, it's not what you do, it's who you are. And realizing that gift is a wonderful thing.
No doubt that World Youth Day has inspired countless vocations, and hopefully this year there will be even more.
Did you know St. Rose of Lima was not a nun? Rather, she was a lay tertiary, spending most of her life at her family home where she worked to support the family. She was such a beautiful baby that she was called Rose, and that name remained. As she grew older, she became more and more beautiful, but she was so devoted to her vow of chastity that she used pepper and lye to ruin her complexion, so she would not be attractive. St. Rose was a mystic and a visionary who received many mental and physical sufferings, including invisible stigmata. St. Rose of Lima, pray for us.
Thanks, Sheridan. You know, we've been talking about the unique contribution and experience of church that World Youth Day is. And I think for a lot of young people, they come here and it's a chance where they get to see the joy of a vocation in the church. And I think we certainly saw that in the clips that we just saw from Sheridan.
Yeah. I love hearing the seminarian and his joy at how he's enjoying it, and the fact that what he said about, one day I'm going to call you Father.
Right,
and,
right.
You must have had.
And certainly when I was in Sydney, I was actually one of the people responsible for the Vocations Fair, and there the Vocations Fair was centered in one spot, and we saw 2,500 young people come through every hour. And it was an enormous amount of people that were coming through, and certainly at this World Youth Day, there are several different venues. Retiro Park is the largest one. It holds about 65 different ecclesial type communities and groups and religious communities and whatnot. And I think, Sister, certainly one of the things that you have to appreciate here for yourself is this is probably the largest gathering of women religious and seminarians and priests that you've probably ever seen.
You're right.
And I think for a lot of the kids, it's inspiring because here you have a chance. I mean, most of the time, if you think what you see back home, I mean, the chances for students or young people to see, multiple priests gathered together, laughing with each other, the fraternal sense that exists between not just the women's communities and the men's communities, but men and women religious communities. I mean, I have a chance to be able to see some of my the friends of mine that are sisters that I don't get to see very often.
And there's something about this whole World Youth Day experience, and I don't know if it's just this meeting with the church. I think it is, because I know you had an experience with the Pope. It wasn't a World Youth Day, and I want to ask you about that. But there's something about it that really is conducive to helping people, not just young people, but everybody kind of be open to a religious calling.
Right.
What was your experience you had?
Well, mine was with John Paul II. He came to St. Louis. And at that time, I had been dating somebody, and we had gone to see John Paul II. And when he came into that arena, I was just really struck because here was this man who was an amazing actor. He was very intelligent.
Yes.
He was into sports. He was into hockey. And God called him, and he said yes to be a priest. He never even knew what God was going to do with him when he said yes. And I remember just watching him and thinking, wow, that is really amazing that he did that. And then when he came in, he was, at that point he was elderly and he was hunched over.
Right.
And everybody was screaming and cheering, and it felt like my world stopped.
Yeah.
And then he said, if anybody here feels called to religious life, I urge them to respond immediately. And I said, okay. But
That's amazing.
I said, if he says yes, then I can say yes. Yeah.
And were you practicing Catholic? I mean, have you been going to church?
Not really. Like my family, we went to Mass sometimes. I was active in youth group, but I really was not practicing my faith that much. And it obviously changed my life.
I want to ask you about that a little bit, but I'm just getting word that the Holy Father is actually en route, and we have a feed now. So just don't go anywhere, because we're going to go right to the Holy Father arriving at the papal welcome ceremony. Holy Father, he's driving on his way to Independence Square, La Plaza de la Independencia, where the papal welcome ceremony is going to begin. And this experience that young people are having right now, or Spanish people, of being close to the Holy Father, I think, Sister, is probably a little bit of what you were experiencing in St. Louis.
It's exactly it. So I mean, the presence of somebody like that who gives their life to Christ, you can't help but want to do the same thing. And I think often in the media we hear so many negative things about the youth, and then when you have the leader of the Catholic Church saying that you're called to nothing less than mere moral and spiritual greatness, that you want to respond. You don't want to settle.
So did you feel encouraged or challenged? Both?
both encourage and challenge.
It's interesting because in the Papal Arrival earlier today, that message came through from both the king and from the Pope himself. Both of them talked about how they wanted to be able to encourage the youth to follow their ambitions, and they wanted to empower the youth. And so I think we see that theme. The king also recognized that this is a country that where a lot of the youth are disenfranchised, they're frustrated. Things are not these are not the easiest times for them. No. And so he had said that the Holy Father is the presence of the Holy Father is one of hope, and that I think we certainly see that.
And even that young people need to be challenged.
Right.
That there's something.
I think they want to be challenged.
Yeah, they do. They do. I mean, maybe that's how you felt.
Yeah,
maybe that's what
you want
was missing for you. Now, once the Holy Father, it's a little bit of a dynamic ceremony that we're going to have. Not unlike the ones in Cologne.
Previous World, all the World Youth Day gatherings,
but certainly the last two because they involved boats and
cars and all kinds of different stops. There's multiple stages, and to this ceremony there are multiple stages, just like years past.
Yes, there won't be any boats, but certainly 2 locations, and the Holy Father will arrive at. You'll see these people might recognize the Plaza de la Independencia, Independence Square, centrally located in Madrid. It has this monument with 5 doorways or gates. And that's where the ceremony is going to begin. And then there will be a little bit more of a drive-through in the Pope Mobile. And then the ceremony will, the actual liturgical part of the ceremony will be at the same site at Cibeles Square where the opening Mass took place on Tuesday night.
Interesting at that Mass when the bishop said, this is the generation of Pope Benedict XVI.
And he made a point to say that it was not the same generation of John Paul II. And I think people I don't know how the two of you feel, but I forget that. Because we're very much John Paul II.
Well, and even during the arrival, I mean, the pilgrims that were there were 2,000 pilgrims that were present at the arrival. And they were saying at at the airport, this is the World Youth Day of Pope Benedict. They were really dedicating it to him.
That's right, and the chant. We are the youth of I can't remember how the chant goes, but we're the youth of the Pope.
Anywhere you go, though, you hear them chanting. The pilgrims are always chanting.
Yes.
Benedicto, and subways everywhere.
Yes, it's. I must say, we mentioned earlier that the energy had changed a little bit.
Right. And it has.
And again, I don't know what it is exactly, other than the Holy Father has arrived, but there is a different energy.
Sister, tell us a little bit about some of your, as you've been in your first World Youth Day, some of the things that you've attended or seen, or what has really left an impression with you. Obviously, it's been a great experience. What are some of the things that have struck you as you've been walking around, or conversations you've been hearing, things you might have learned or picked up? Or
I think one of the things, yesterday we went to the Prado, and I just kept thinking about how these people had this gift of art, and they had something really deep that they were holding on to that they wanted to express. So when you saw the crucifixion and the Annunciation, this was an expression of somebody's prayer, somebody's relationship with Christ, and now you see all these young people, and they are just as excited about their relationship with Christ. And I keep thinking, I wonder what God is going to do, what kind of art, what kind of things are these young people going to produce.
Right.
Today on the way here, I saw a group of students, and I told them that I was going to be on here. I said, what would you want me to say? And they said, tell them we love the Pope. We love him. And it was just exciting to see all these people that are so diverse, yet so united in faith. It's really cool.
I was in a media panel earlier today, and the question that was asked to us, I'm wondering, Sister, what your response would be, or even Pedro, what yours would be, but they asked us, they said, how has Pope Benedict influenced your ministry? And I said, I'm a teacher, and I really have appreciated the teacher in this Pope, that he has that he has really allowed for the conversations, the Q&A that he's had with seminarians or even with the press corps, that he's really allowed for questions to be asked, and he really has tried to be a teacher for the church in a way that I don't quite see that Pope John Paul II was. I think that you've really seen more of the teacher in Pope Benedict, and so for myself as a teacher, that is one way he has really influenced my own ministry. And that was reiterated, and actually there were about 5 of us on this panel, and that was reiterated by all of us, that we appreciated that he was like a professor to us. It was you could read him and you could be present, read him and you could listen to all the various avenues we have to hear him and his thoughts, and we really feel like we were his students in many ways.
Yeah, and often, if you ever watch on TV or you've been there when he is preaching, sometimes he has his paper in front of him and then he puts the paper down and he looks up and this is a teaching moment. Like, he's ready to speak. But I also think that what sticks out to me is when he was elected, somebody, I can't remember who it was, said that he has the intelligence of 7 college professors and the piety of a child on the day of his first communion. And I think that he really reflects the relationship. Like, he talks about, the friendship with Christ. He really reflects that because he uses all of his intelligence, for promoting the gospel and promoting the Word of God. And I think that's the same thing. Like, I hope that I can pick up on that and do the same thing, and also to teach like that.
Right.
Because he teaches by who he is, and his words. Right. But he teaches really by who he is.
Right. Well, the best teacher is the one who teaches by witnessing.
And he does
Paul VI?
it.
Who said that?
Paul VI.
Paul VI.
Right.
Yeah.
Pedro, all of this conversation that we're having as we're watching the Pope reach his destination reminds me, in some respects, of the catechesis sessions that have continually occurred today, as they did yesterday, and today in this center we heard from our own Archbishop Michael Miller from Vancouver, certainly one of my own, a Basilian himself, and he reiterated very much what the Australian Cardinal Pell had talked about in regards to that all of this doesn't mean a whole lot. These days don't mean a whole lot unless there's some sort of action that follows. And Archbishop Miller actually referred to the gospel, the same gospel that the Pope will use later on this evening. And Archbishop Miller said that we must be hearers and doers of the word, and called these days, these World Youth Days, days of decision. And so it just reiterates, the seeds of vocation, whether it be to religious life or to priesthood or to even marriage, but some form of ministry in the church. These are really days of decisions in which seeds are planted, and there really is an encouragement of these young people to say, choose your mission, to kind of reiterate some of what we talked about the other night.
What Cardinal Pell said in Sydney 3 years ago.
For these to be days of decision, for these young people to not get lost in the options, but to really choose a mission and live it.
And also what Cardinal Rocco, in his homily of Tuesday, spoke in terms of World Youth Day being an encounter with Christ, and that we should let ourselves be encountered by Christ. And I've always, not always, but I grew to learn that when you have an encounter with Christ, it leads to a calling. You don't just encounter Christ and that's the end of it. It leads to a calling, and that's, vocation. That's what a vocation is.
Right. And then his message for the World Youth Day, like the Holy Father, he went through and he talked about how every generation really feels called to do something exceptional. Like, nobody wants to do anything that's just normal. And I guess that's the beauty of the World Youth Day, is that you're reaching to that call. That's a natural call anyway.